In the book, Garraty's like a lot of the other kids. He can't really articulate why he signed up for the Long Walk lottery. Maybe it's the prize or the prestige, but it's most likely just a chance to escape his shitty life. See, they're all straightforward motivations. Now, like the movie, he has vivid memories of his father being dragged out of their family home, all for expressing anti-government sentiments against a fascist autocracy. However, Book Garraty neither sees his father executed, nor is it directly at the hands of the Major. And sure, Book Garraty is likely in some way reacting subconsciously to the anger of his father being gone, but it's not nearly as explicit as the movie. Ray's father once took him as a child to watch The Long Walk, as a cautionary tale of their government. He literally brought his child to witness federally sanctioned murder, hoping to inoculate him against the system's poison. And what does Garraty do? He signs up for the exact nightmare his old man was trying to warn him against. Now, as for the movie, Francis Lawrence gave Cooper Hoffman's Garraty a much more personal stake. In this version, Garraty watched the Major execute his father in the street. So now his drive is about revenge. It's about getting close enough to the monster to make him pay. For the most part, it actually works. It gives Garraty a harder edge and makes his determination feel more desperate. And when he finally sees his mother later in the film, that regret hits differently because you understand what he's really sacrificing. It was just him and her, and now he's gone. It's spiteful self-destruction at its most devastating. Garraty's not just walking toward death. He's walking toward everything his father feared in a naive attempt at revenge. But it's not until much later in Garraty's Long Walk that he realizes the system always wins. And in this case, the system wins twice. At first, by taking out the father, and then by taking out the son. Here's a change that might seem minor, but it actually shifts the entire emotional landscape of the story. And it's also the part that left most of my theater sobbing, and the woman next to us asking her boyfriend why'd he drag her to a movie like this. Which, I get it. In both the movie and the novel, Garraty has a girlfriend named Jan. Now, in the source material, Garraty never broke up with his high school sweetheart. It came close, and he recalls how she pleaded with him to back out of the Long Walk. But they stand by one another. And it's Jan who Garraty fixates on and then deifies before the end. See, as the Long Walk progresses, Garraty stops seeing Jan as an actual person, and he starts turning her into this idealized symbol of everything worth living for. And it's because he needs something pure to hold on to while he's knee-deep in horror. And when the walk reaches Freeport, and he finally sees her in the crowd, what does our boy do? He completely ignores his mother. The woman who actually raised him, who's actually there suffering, and collapses into Jan's arms with tears streaming down his face. It takes McVries physically dragging him away to keep him from getting shot right there in front of them. The movie cuts Jan entirely. They broke up before the walk, and that was the end of their story. Instead, it's Garraty's mother waiting in the crowd. And suddenly, the emotional stakes aren't about teenage romance anymore. They're about a son realizing what his obsession with revenge is doing to the person who loves him most unconditionally.
I'm so sorry, Mom!
And this is why it works better. And it's a hill I'm willing to die on. Teenage heartbreak is universal, of course. But it's also temporary. Your first love feels like the end of the world until it doesn't. But your mother's love? That's the kind of bond that cuts to the bone. That's the love that shaped you before you even knew what love was. My man Scramm, they did you dirty. One of the most interesting characters in the book, and they just gut him. Now, Scramm is a bit of a two-dimensional hillbilly type with missing teeth from the Midwest. But he's also the most outwardly athletic boy, and the odds makers in Vegas think he's the one to beat. That is until he gets a cold and eventually lets himself die after making the others promise to take care of his family. And his family is what makes him interesting. He chose to do this suicide walk because he had a wife and child on the way. When everyone else is talking about girlfriends or chicks they're horny for, Scramm's the only one married. The movie just doesn't have Scramm at all. Instead, they split his characteristics between other characters. Hank Olsen gets the wife back home, though we don't know if she's pregnant. Stebbins gets Scramm's physical strength and endurance, plus the illness that eventually takes him down. And speaking of Hank Olsen, his death in the movie is already pretty horrific. He snaps, attacks a soldier, gets shot, and then bleeds out on the road as a warning to others. It's brutal and effective. But King took that shit to another level. In the book, Olsen doesn't just get shot and fall down. He gets shot and keeps walking, with his intestines hanging out of his body. He keeps trying to move forward even as he's literally falling apart, getting shot again and again until he finally collapses. And then they shoot him one last time to ensure he's dead. Despite how brutal this movie is, I understand why they dialed it back. Some things are left better on the page. Stebbins is fascinating in both versions. He's the Major's bastard son, and he's walking to force his father to acknowledge him. But his fate changes significantly between book and film. In King's novel, he becomes the favorite to win after Scramm's death, showing himself to be impossible to wear down. And near the end of the book, when it's just him and Garraty, he tells Garraty that the Major deliberately distanced him psychologically in order to make him a rabbit, like one you would find in a greyhound race. And this is to provoke other walkers into catching him. See, he's also the last walker to die, and as he's dying of exhaustion, he claws desperately at Garraty. In the movie, they give him Scramm's death instead. See, he gets sick, he reveals his parentage, gives Ray and Peter some final advice, and lets himself die. It's more drawn out and more sentimental in a way, but not necessarily worse, just different. This is one of those changes that completely shifts how you feel about a character. In the movie, Peter McVries is a bit snarky, but he's ultimately extremely supportive. He's the guy you would want next to you in a hell like this. David Johnson brilliantly plays Peter with dazzling charisma and affability. And we eventually learn that this aura is something he carefully cultivated over a lifetime of uncertainty and loneliness. It turns out that Peter is an orphan who got the scar on his face by being beaten by a stranger he picked a fight with. He's since learned how to integrate himself with other kids, and this allows him to build fast and profound connections after spending his teenage years sleeping on couches and in basements.
I sort of like you three. Let's be musketeers. All for one.
One for all.
Stop. And again, I need to hear it louder. All for one.
And one for all.
He doesn't quite articulate it, but it feels like McVries joined the long walk for the camaraderie and a sense of belonging it provides. He feels like he's found a real brother in Garraty, and perhaps a bit more. Now, Book McVries, he's crueler, more cutting with his verbal attacks. And that scar he has, he's got it from his girlfriend Priscilla, after he tried to sexually assault her and she fought back with a letter opener. Now, before the constant readers get pissed off, yes, the sexual assault is deliberately vague, with Peter telling Ray that it wasn't his intention, but when he reached out to kiss her, she cut him to protect herself. But you have to remember, this is his version of events, and there's a self-loathing in Peter that gives pause and makes you read between the lines. McVries ultimately admits that since that day, he's had a death wish, just as he suspects every boy on the long walk secretly does in one way or another.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize the truth of this. This is walk or die.
The movie completely rewrites his backstory and makes him far more sympathetic. Now, whether you like it or not, it depends. I personally loved it because I never really liked the Peter in my headcanon sexually assaulting his girlfriend. So this version, I love him. Both versions have the remaining walkers agree to stop helping each other. Every man for himself as they approach the finish line. But the book, it takes this vow way more seriously, and it costs people their lives. Now, in the movie, the Musketeers of Garraty, McVries, and Baker, They quickly abandon this promise when one of them starts to fade. In the book, they stick to it, and it's devastating. Characters who could have been saved, they're left to die because of this self-imposed rule. There's a walker named Abraham, and he's not even in the film. He's the one to suggest the no-help pact, and then immediately suffers for it when no one gives him a shirt overnight. He develops a cold, and eventually he falls way behind. It's a brutal lesson in how good intentions can become weapons. For this next one, I'm going to lump a bunch of smaller things together under changes the filmmakers made for expediency. Here's a fun bit of trivia that King's hardcore fans spotted immediately in the trailers. In the book, these walkers have to maintain 4 miles per hour or they get a warning. The movie drops it to 3.
Maintain a speed of 3 miles per hour. Walk until there's only one of you left. Who's ready to fucking win?
Stephen King himself asked them to change it. Apparently, the man finally did the math and realized there's no way you could walk 4 miles an hour for that long. 4 miles per hour is basically a brisk jog disguised as a walk, and trying to maintain that while having deep conversations about life and death? Not very practical. The slower pace also means the actors can, actually act instead of just trying not to trip over their own feet while delivering dialogue. It was a very smart call. The book throws 100 kids into this meat grinder, allegedly chosen by random lottery. The movie cuts it to 50. Why? Because paying 50 extras is much cheaper than paying 100. And managing that many characters in a coherent narrative is a nightmare nobody wants to deal with. They also made each walker represent a different state, which is tidier than King's version where Garraty just happens to be the local main kid by coincidence. It's more systematic, less random, and it honestly fits the dystopian government aesthetic better anyway. In King's novel, these kids walk past cheering crowds in every small town. Because apparently in this dystopia, watching children die is peak entertainment. The movie says crowds are banned. Again, this screams budget constraints, but in a certain way, the isolated, emptier world actually makes the whole thing feel more ominous. Then there's a bunch of smaller beats that got axed. Olsen's early psychological warfare against other walkers, a whole subplot about one kid's mother trying to reach her son from the sidelines before getting arrested by the government, and a boy who's killed because he's really horny. But this is Adaptation 101. You can't include every flavor of King's paranoia and social commentary in an hour and 45 minutes. Sometimes you just have to trust that the core story is strong enough to carry the weight without every single supporting beam from the original structure. Are these changes profound artistic choices that reshape the meaning of the work? Hell no. They're the practical compromises that happen when you're trying to turn a book into a movie without going bankrupt. The real question is whether they serve the story or hurt it. And mostly, they just get things out of the way. Now, on to the biggest changes in the book, and they all revolve around the ending. King's ending is the kind of literary mindfuck that separates the wheat from the chaff in horror writing. The final two aren't Garraty and McVries. It's Garraty and Stebbins. McVries just sits down like he's tired of the whole game and takes his bullet with something approaching peace. Stebbins, for all his arrogance and superhuman endurance, simply collapses dead from exhaustion. His body just gives out like a broken machine. So Garraty wins, and the Major shows up to shake his hand and congratulate him on his victory. Except Garraty doesn't even see the old bastard. He's staring past him at something else entirely. A dark figure beckoning him forward. Garraty stepped aside. He was not alone. The dark figure was back, up ahead, not far, beckoning. He knew that figure. If he could get a little closer, he could make out the features. Which one hadn't he walked down? Was it Barkovich? Collie Parker? Percy what's-his-name? Who was it? A hand on his shoulder. Garraty shook it off impatiently. The dark figure beckoned in the rain, beckoned for him to come and walk, to come and play the game. And it was time to get started. There was still so far to walk. The ending is deliberately opaque, and that's the point. What is Garraty seeing? Is it death? The ghosts of everyone he watched die? Maybe his shattered psyche? King leaves it hanging there like a question you can't stop asking yourself. But here's what I think King is really saying. Nobody wins this game. Ever. Even if you're the last man standing, the trauma and the horror of what you've endured will haunt you until your dying day. And it's because the walk never really ends. It just moves from your feet into your head and is there to stay forever. It was bleak as hell and probably too abstract for a studio movie. Yet it's absolutely perfect for what King was trying to accomplish. The movie, it says forget the poetry. Instead of Garraty winning, he sacrifices himself to save McVries. The kid obsessed with revenge, who entered this death march exclusively to get close enough to kill the Major, he gives up his life to save his friend, and McVries becomes the reluctant winner. But here's where it gets interesting. McVries doesn't take his prize and walk into the sunset. No. In the film's final moments, he asks for a rifle and puts a bullet in the Major's chest, right there on live television. Then he walks into the rain and darkness, only to die within minutes, or at least that's what we're left to believe. On the surface, it's crowd-pleasing as hell. The bad guy gets his comeuppance. Justice is served. But if you dig a little deeper, it's just as hopeless as King's version. Maybe even more so. And here's the thing. The movie's ending is actually more subversive than the books. King's poetic conclusion is sophisticated and matches the nihilistic 1970s vibe perfectly. But it's ultimately defeatist. There's no hope. There's no possibility of change. Live or die, you always lose. McVries probably won't survive much longer than Book Garraty does. But he still manages to do something revolutionary. He murdered a symbol of oppression right there on live television. But he didn't do it out of hate. He did it as an act of love for his friend. And that's the kind of transgressive ending that feels startlingly relevant right now. When people feel angry and helpless against systems that seem designed to crush them. There's a flicker of something there. The idea that love might just be radical enough to spark change, even if it costs you everything. Both endings are brutal. Both leave you feeling gutted. But the movie's version suggests that maybe one act of love-driven rebellion can crack the foundation of oppression, even if you don't live to see what grows from the rubble. It's not hope exactly, but it is something. Now, that's it for me on The Long Walk. What did you think about the movie? Did you read the book beforehand, or did you go in blind? Let me know in the comments. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends, family, and hell, even your enemies. Just please not the Major. And of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because every subscriber inches me one step closer to taking over the Galaxies. Until next time, take care, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.